inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. For the past 11 weeks, we have focused on the issues and candidates that were on the Tuesday ballot. A week ago this time, a frequent comment I heard was, "I'll be so glad when this election is over." In the aftermath of the November 8th results, it is hard to simply move on. That came home to me on Wednesday, the day after, with only 5 hours sleep after reporting on the election results Tuesday night. I was the guide on an all-day bus tour on Cincinnati history for school administrators. The young woman who was the organizer of the tour is an immigrant from a war-torn section of Eastern Europe. I have known her for 4 or 5 years. Towards the end of the day, she said to me, "Dan, this is the first day since I entered this country that I fear for my physical safety and the safety of my family." That comment has haunted me this week. If someone who has followed all the rules, who has all the right documents that we demand, who is gainfully and professionally employed, is engaged in the wider community in a variety of ways, if she fears for her safety simply because she has followed the path everyone else who lives in this country has followed, we have a post-election challenge from which we cannot just move on. Elections have consequences. Our words have consequences. Ironically, a new website that was launched this week, the Cincinnati Compass, this is an immigrant portal, is one of the manifestation of a wider effort sparked by Mayor John Cranley several years ago to make Cincinnati the most welcoming city in America for immigrants. The development of the Cincinnati Compass website was led by the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber with the support of the University of Cincinnati, Xavier University, NKU, and 60 community partners. I am joined this morning by Mary Stagaman, the Senior Inclusion Advisor of the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber. Ms. Stagaman is responsible for ensuring that the Chamber models inclusiveness and regional thinking in everything it does. Mary, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Good morning, Dan. It's great
you
to
were
see
here
you.
a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and we were talking that this was coming, and it just seems so timely that this is here. Right at this moment, that you launched this and it's available.
Well, and that wasn't lost on us when we launched it last week, that it just seemed like the right time, right place, everything was coming together. I think it's important to say about Cincinnati Compass that the way we're looking at this is the way our startup community looks at a new business. They talk about something called MVPs, which are minimally viable prototypes. And what we mean by this is that we've put this together, we've given it as many features and as much functionality as we think it could have starting out, and then we're asking the community to help us make it a better portal for immigrants and internationals who want to be a part of our community.
So is your primary audience immigrants themselves, international residents here in our region?
Well, I think it's them, and I think it's also those of us in the community who want to interact with them, want to do business with them, want to welcome them and make them part of our community.
Here's one of the things that just signals who this is for. Stay right where you are, don't go away.
Okay.
You can come in here and select your language and automatically change it. Let's change it to Afrikaans just for the heck of it. And all of a sudden, the language changes all through the system. Right. So whatever your home language is, you can now read the portal.
Whatever your first language is.
First language is.
Many immigrants, of course, speak English, and
right.
some have English as a second language, but this makes it easier for people to feel welcome. I should say it's Google Translate, it's machine translation, so it could result in a few laughs on the part of the receiving end because right. the translation may not be exact. But I think all of us have hit that EN at the top of a web page before when we're looking at something in another country, right. and we know what can happen. And so people will make adjustments because of it.
You know, there's all kinds of things on this, and I want to talk about it a little bit. One of the things that I found really interesting was the data section. And in the data section, you can get all sorts of things, including like demographics. You know, people want to know how many immigrants are here, how many foreign-born people live here.
Right,
and
exactly.
One of the things, you can get the data, but the point is, compared to a lot of other places, not that many.
Well, I think let's start with that. I mean, right now, our foreign-born population in this region is less than 4% of the population, but they really have an outsized impact. We've talked about this before.
Right.
They pay nearly $200 million in state and local taxes every year. They have $1.5 billion in spending power. Mm-hmm. They are 11% of our IT workers in this region, and they hold a lot more advanced degrees than our native population. So immigrants are helping us at across the spectrum of work in our community. They're the people who are taking care of our elderly parents in nursing homes and other care facilities. They're also, though, the doctors who are taking care of them as well. And so they're extremely important to our community. The data's important, Dan, but the stories are also important.
Well, I just want to say, before we move on from data, while you were talking, I punched up the economic data.
Yeah.
Which is there as so the stories. And you've got a number of different stories up at this point.
Right. And this is just the beginning.
Right.
Again, going back to that MVP idea, we have 3 stories on the site right now, but we have 6 more in the can already, and we're just getting the photography done. But we want a rolling cycle of stories that tell us who are these immigrants and internationals in our community, because they represent such a wide spectrum of experience and talents and skills that they bring to the community, and all their stories are different.
And with those stories, so there's 3 up here now. How did you find these particular people to focus on?
Well, you mentioned in your introduction that we worked on Cincinnati Compass with more than 60 community partners. The Chamber was responsible for making it happen, but it could not have happened without the support of all of the organizations in this community that have historically served immigrant populations. And so we reached out to them and said, who you got? Tell us your most compelling stories. So right now, I think we're looking at Haneen, who actually had came to this country and had to start from nothing, and is now a business owner in our community. In fact, she'll be on a panel next week at Xavier University that I'm doing with the Williams College of Business, talking about how she's got one of the most successful brow businesses in community. Now, this is something brow, as in women's brows. This has become a very serious part of the beauty business, and she's an expert.
All right, I'll take your word for it. And here's another story right here. It's the 3rd one.
Yeah,
this is Leslie's.
Leslie's another great example. So when we looked at who are the immigrants in our community, right, we came up with 10 different categories. And Leslie represents one that we call expats or expatriates. These are people who come here to work for a corporation like Procter & Gamble's. That's what Leslie did. And often, whether they stay with the company or not, they end up making Cincinnati a home. But they're here with us for a number of years, and we want them to feel as welcome as someone who's making this a permanent home.
One of the things I got to do for a number of years was to do bus tours for the spouses of people from P&G who are international employees of P&G.
They actually have an organization for them called P&G ITI for the international
that's what I did
spouses.
It for. Yeah, that's what I did it for. And what a fascinating group of people. I mean, yes, their spouses were hired by P&G, but there were PhDs, there were engineers, there were a fantastic group of people. I want to be clear, though, this isn't just for high-end immigrants. This is for people, you mentioned people who might be working in home health or in a number of other areas.
And for example, we know that one of the parts of this community that needs the greatest amount of assistance, even though their numbers are small, are refugees. There are a tremendous number of organizations in our community who support them, and including, of course, Catholic Charities, which is the official resettlement organization here, and also Refugee Connect, which is a project of the Junior League of Cincinnati. And they've wrapped their arms around refugees once they've gone through that initial resettlement process in order to help them feel more welcome in our community.
Well, what's happened here is my limited capabilities.
Your technological prowess.
Everything has gone so big.
Capacity.
But there was that section on here that I want to get to. Yeah, well, there it is. Look at that.
Hey, together, Dan.
You saved me.
You want to go to
the resources?
Yes.
So for somebody who, for example, is a student.
Yeah.
Who's an international student. You spent a lot of your career at the University of Cincinnati.
I did indeed, right.
And Xavier and NKU. Were part of this.
That's right.
They move here and they need services. And so if you're a student, you could go there and there's a whole set of things. And of course, what jumps right out at me because of my wife's connections to 4C for Children, just because of the way it's numbered, and it's right there. The Red Cross is there. The Archdiocese of Cincinnati for Refugees is there because they're the official
But they
welcomer.
also serve a lot of long-time foreign-born individuals in our community through their Circasa program and many others. I think the thing about students that's important to talk about is right now we have we have more than 7,000 foreign-born students, international students in our midst. We don't keep very many of them at graduation or at completion of a master's or a PhD. And part of what we're working on at the Chamber, and one of the reasons we continue to work for immigration reform, is so that if we could get the cap raised or the cap eliminated on H-1B visas, these doctors and scientists and engineers and others who are studying in our schools, learning from our professors at our universities, could actually stay and become active members of our economy.
There's other categories here besides. Oops,
that's the language.
That's the language. Right. Okay, resources.
Can we go to calendar for a second?
Well, you can go to calendar for a second, sure. I can do anything because I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, I was two things about the site that I think are really interesting. One is that Reverb Art and Design, the company that designed and built the site for us, is actually that Leo and Michelle DeCruz are children of immigrants. So it's a Hispanic-owned business. We were delighted to have that connection back to the work we were doing because they feel this so deeply. But then we went to another Cincinnati startup called Hapsing, which helped build the Startup Cincy calendar. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And they're building this calendar for us. And so over time, and we invite everyone who listens to your program, Dan, to actually help us build it. If you want to be a publisher on this site, you can do that. You want to let us know that you have events that will be of interest to immigrants and internationals in our community, or you know that others in the community will be interested in connecting because of the cultural flavor that is on that calendar. And so over time, it's going to build. It's going to be a really rich resource for people. You can curate the calendar to exactly what you want to learn about.
You can go to the date. You can there's all sorts of things you can look at particular days. You can look at particular things.
You know, coming up, I mean, this is the Indian Film Festival of Cincinnati. I just found out last week, and I'll be there tomorrow morning to welcome the audience. This is a new collaboration between the Indian community here and the Cincinnati Art Museum, and there will be a series of incredibly beautiful films coming out of India that will be shown tomorrow afternoon and Sunday afternoon at the Art Museum.
India has a real growing film.
The film industry there is phenomenal.
It's huge.
Right.
So, I want to call attention before we run out of time. I want to call attention to one more thing, and that is on Tuesday of this week, you're going to be hosting, and there's going to be a leadership diversity or diversity leadership conference this year for 2016. We've had similar ones like this for the past few years. This is another chance for the community to come together across a lot of lines and be together in the same room.
Right, and you know, that symposium, we're in our 5th year of a partnership with Fifth Third Bank, which is the presenting sponsor of the symposium, but many other companies in the region, many other organizations also support it, and it's our way of taking stock each year on how we're doing in making a more inclusive region. We've got a room full of people on Tuesday morning. Our keynote speaker is Anant Giridharadas, who has written for the New York Times, and he's been a done frequent appearances on CNN and MSNBC and Morning Joe, and you get it. And he's going to talk about the future of leading in a multicultural world.
Perfect. I mean, these are two positive things that we're taking in this community, steps we're taking in this community to make sure that that young woman who I encountered on Wednesday doesn't feel that she's by herself.
Absolutely, and I think we also have an obligation, Dan, to understand why the election went the way that it did and to open our arms to everyone in our community and think about the people right here at home we need to welcome as well.
Mary, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
this. Keep it up, and I know you will. That's not a problem. To begin exploring the Cincinnati Compass website, go to www.cincinnaticompass.org to find out more and register for this year's Diversity Leadership Conference on Tuesday. Go to the CincinnatiChamber.com website, and the links are right there on the front page. Or call 513-579-3111 first thing tomorrow morning on Monday morning. Mary, thank you very much.
You're so welcome,
Very
Dan.
good.
It's a pleasure.
Stay tuned after the break. A powerful exhibit that invites each of us to grapple with the how and when those in power turned fellow citizens into the other led to the worst tragedy in modern Western history. Welcome back. The fear of the other, the search for scapegoats in the face of seemingly intractable difficulties, is an impulse that can be seen in societies throughout history. Nowhere did this reach an uglier crescendo than in Central Europe in the 1930s and 40s. The Nazis set out not in a burst of anger, but with systematic determination to exterminate the Jews of Central Europe, who had been the target of tribal hostility for centuries. The machine the Third Reich built was a full expression of the industrial society. We all know something about the concentration camps. My father, whose World War II unit was sent into Dachau in the days immediately after its liberation, was rarely willing to talk about what he saw. Only once or twice did he talk with me. But a letter he wrote to my mother powerfully expressed his revulsion from looking into the hell human scapegoating and hatred creates. It shook his confidence in the American mythology of human progress. As we get 7 decades away from the Holocaust, it is important that those still wrestling to understand its significance, which should be all of us, by the way, stay rooted as closely as possible to the terrible reality of the camps. A new exhibit at the Skirball Museum at the campus of Hebrew Union College, entitled 12 Concentration Camps, features the images of photographer James Friedman, who traveled to the camps in Austria, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, France, Germany, and Poland. I am joined this morning by James Friedman, an Ohio photographer who lives in Columbus. Mr. Friedman has been recognized with many awards, contributed images to many publications and exhibits. Sarah Weiss is the director of the Holocaust and Humanity Education Center, which is co-sponsoring this exhibit, and also has a companion exhibit, Through Their Lens, photo reflection on the Holocaust at the center on Montgomery Road. And Rabbi Kenneth Kanter, the Associate Dean and Director of the Rabbinical School for Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati. To all of you, welcome. Thank you for coming down, Jim. We really appreciate it. How did this happen? How did you go off to start working on taking photographs? And these are photographs that you took of the camps today, or in recent years anyway.
Well, I did the project in the early 1980s.
Okay.
The genesis began when I was a child. I had experienced anti-Semitic acts that were perpetrated against me and my family. I grew up in a upper middle class Midwestern suburb where you wouldn't think racism or anti-Semitism would really be very prevalent.
Well, I think the right thing to say is we would like to think it wouldn't be prevalent.
We'd like to think it, but it was there in great and small instances.
Just want to start out with one photo, and that is this woman in a sash who we'll bring up in just a second. Who is this woman, and how did you run into her?
This is a camp near Lublin, Poland, a place called Majdanek. And I happened to be there on a National Day of Remembrance that was televised throughout Poland. And she was a heroine. She was given medals and honored as someone who had survived three camps, including that one. And there was some connection there when I saw her. The thing that struck me most and strikes me now as I look at it again 30 years after I took it was the fact that she was so serene and so calm and so... It struck me and it stayed with me all these years that she was okay with it. She had gotten through it and made it there and was proud to be there.
And created a life for herself.
She did, and it was very...
Sarah, you deal with survivors,
yeah.
mostly from our region.
Right.
When you see some of these photos of the survivors particularly, and we might go to the photo that Jim took of the Dutch resistance. There's 5 of them. We'll get that up in a second. What would you say about the people you interact with?
So first I want to say what's extremely unique about these photographs is they were taken in the 1980s when very few people were traveling to Eastern Europe. That was still under the Iron Curtain. And so that in itself opens up a whole different dimension of looking at remembrance. And in terms of the survivors, I think survivors of the Holocaust, as well as the liberators, as you mentioned your father at the beginning, responded in different ways. So some, like the woman you saw and took the photograph of, looks like she's just accepting what's happening. Others reacted in different ways. But I think that's what's interesting also about these photographs is they look at the different ways in which people came into contact with these sites, which we see as in some ways sacred, and yet the photograph you saw was of a survivor remembering. But there's also photographs of
we'll get to one in just a minute.
Yeah.
Ken, why is this important that this be exhibited on the campus of Hebrew Union College,
right,
where you have students that you're training?
Well, you made the comment, Dan, that this is now 70 years ago, and we are within a few years of no survivors left. There's nothing more powerful with a bunch of young people at a school, as Sarah does regularly, to bring in someone who can roll up his or her sleeve on the clothing and show the numbers that are tattooed onto their arm, and have that impact on a child who's going to say, that person was there. Yeah. I don't know how many of the people in Jim's pictures 30 years later are still alive. No. But my bet is that many of them are not. And so the power of these pictures, and why the Skirball at Hebrew Union College, in partnership with the Holocaust Center, is so committed to these pictures, is that it shows in a graphic way what the past was, and you'll see that through some remarkable historical pictures that Jim has added to the collection of kind of iconic pictures from the war at the same time, to then the 1980s. That image, as we just saw and we'll see in this program, but for our students and all students to see and to have this memory seared into their spirit and into their psyches, that's the power of this collection and the power of this exhibit.
Sarah said something about the sites, and the sites are sacred, but they also go on, and they've been used. And we have one of your photos again of some farmers who were, and in the 1980s, were working on the site. Again, very determined, strong, people. Why did you take this picture? This is the one with the man with the sigh.
This is at Birkenau, which is Auschwitz II, the second of the Auschwitz camps in that panoply of sites. A person who lived in Auschwitz, which is a town where Auschwitz was in Poland, was given a plot of land inside the camp to tend, and they would to keep the camp looking tended and kempt, so he was there with his scythe. So that's sort of a tool that certainly would not be used currently. So it made it look like he was stepping out of the 19th century, and he told me through an interpreter that he had helped prisoners escape from Auschwitz, which may or may have not been true. And the answer to your question directly is that picture posed a problem for me. You have a man standing there that looks like the Grim Reaper. And so there could be an issue of kitsch or corniness or devolving into cliche. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed having that opportunity and to do that.
I'm terribly sorry, but we're going to run out of time. There's one photo I would like to bring up, and I'll make this work time-wise. There are students coming to the site, and Sarah, this is what happens at your museum, your exhibit. but here's some students arriving at the site and seeing photo blow-ups on the back.
Right.
Interesting dynamic
Right.
of what's going on there. And I have to wrap it up right now. But the important thing is, it's not how many photos we saw here. The important thing is this exhibit and the companion exhibit are available. And to view the 12 concentration camps exhibit in full at your own pace is on display till the end of January at the Skirball Museum on the campus of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. The museum is in Marison Hall, right at the entrance of the campus on Clifton Avenue, not hard to find, and the exhibit is open from 11 to 4 on Tuesdays through Thursdays and 1 to 5 on Sundays. Thank you very much for being here. Sorry we ran out of time, too much good stuff, and thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Have a good one.